Hi, Ed Beckley again, and in this video we're going to talk about enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Well, the simple definition that I like to use is perceiving, seeing the world not through the prism of the ego. Notice that word prism. Prism, what is a prism? It's seeing things refracted. It's seeing things cut up, sliced and diced and put into different areas. We categorize these areas. Instead, we begin seeing the world as it is, rather than through all the various contours, impressions, past impressions of the mind, all these kinds of things. We start seeing the world simply as it is. And as it is, it becomes so intimate to ourselves that everything is identified as ourself. We begin seeing the world as one, a dance of one. We begin seeing life in the most intimate form that we might see an animal suffering and beginning to feel that animal suffering in our own hearts. And at the same time, expanding that compassion to people, to places, to plants, to the environment. We begin feeling one with all that is. One of the hallmarks of what we call enlightenment is accepting life as it is, as it comes at us. Each of us have had challenges in life, and what ends up happening is, as we're confronted by those challenges, we either react or we respond. When we react to challenges, what are we reacting from? We're reacting from past impressions. That's right, past impressions. Let's say that your wife or your husband says something kind of nasty to you. And typically there's going to be a reaction of some type in the normal state of consciousness. Now, for many people, their reaction might be silence. For others, it might be shouting. It depends on how they grew up. Where are those original impressions that we gained when we were young, or impressions that we have completely woven into our genetic code? You know, when we talk about enlightenment, what comes is the word freedom, liberation. Liberated from what? Liberated from that sense, that egoic sense that I'm separate from all of this magnificent luminescence that exists in life. Each one of us are only a facet of every one of those. And there's such intimacy that the heart and the mind begin to fuse into this oneness, into this unity. How does this happen? A number of different ways. So far, we've talked about the evolution of consciousness. We've talked about the first part of us even waking up. It's the recognition, the recognition that most of us are programmed beings. We're programmed by the past impressions of how we grew up, the past impressions of our work life, our family life. All these past impressions have shaped, molded, and sculpted us into who we think we are. I am my thoughts. I am my emotions. I am that. And when we're so mind identified in that way and emotionally identified, then We're in bondage. We're imprisoned by the past. As we begin to evolve, as we meditate and begin the recognition that there's something else. There's something else. There's another dimension that supersedes this, that transcends just the I-ness. And that which transcends it is that which sees. The seer begins to wake up. So there's a separation between who you take yourself to be and that which is perceiving who you take yourself to be. You hear me? And if it seems a little hazy right now, as you meditate, it'll become clearer. Let me give you some examples. Sometimes listening to just some great music, we're just inspired. I love that word, inspired. The spire goes up. We're just taken away. And in that moment, there are no thoughts. There are no images. There's just inspiration. The heart opens, the mind is clear. And in those moments, we've transcended. What have we transcended? We've transcended our mind, the mind-ego complex. And we're in this beautiful, sublime field of stillness. As we begin to evolve, those moments of stillness begin to lengthen in periods of time while we're awake. And they begin to permeate not only when we're awake and we're looking at the world, a certain kinds of separation starts to occur. And as we begin looking at the world, we begin seeing it, dancing and separating and just the beauty of it. But at that point, we're still a little bit separate. There still seems to be this deep observer inside of ourselves. As we evolve further, then the heart begins to open. As the heart begins to open, that separation that had been there and begin to permeate not only your waking state, but your dream state and your deep sleep state, and it begins to coexist with both of those, so it's permanently integrated into those. You've now woken up from what I call the hypnosis of life, that I am my thoughts, I am my emotions. And as we've woken up from each of those, as we recognize that this new dimension is truly who we are, we begin to evolve to another state. And that other state is the most sublime state. We've woken up from this hypnotic spell that I am my mind, I am my body, and that's the way it is. And we begin to feel an intimate love beyond ourselves. This is not the love that people call romantic love. It's a different kind of love. It's an unconditional love, and it's spontaneous. You begin to notice it because as you just happen to look out at some scenery, you begin feeling this inspiring love, this feeling, this silky, almost honey-like feeling in the heart. It's causeless love, too. It can be felt in meditation. It can be felt by just sitting there and appreciating the finest level of life as we see it. And finally, in the state we're talking about right now, enlightenment. Enlightenment is freedom. It's liberation. It's really feeling ourselves becoming one with the world. The hypnotic spell is over. as we begin to feel one with the world, we begin moving from what I call the reactive state of the mind, much more to the responsive state. Now, by the way, each of these states are not necessarily in such a linear order. These states overlap. One could feel some enlightened states even in the earlier levels as consciousness begins to awaken. So, these 5 levels are the levels in which I would invite each and every one of you to experience. I meet with people via Skype, one-on-one, weekly. And for people who are passionate seekers, people like yourselves that want to know and want to live this life of sublime liberation, this life in which there's no more suffering, there's no more fear, that's allowing life to dance as it is. It's called enlightenment. Thank you very much.